So some people might say that I've made maybe one or two too many Rahi. And I would have to say, I don't agree. I'm going to be making more. Don't worry about it. But today's video, I'm actually going to be kind of addressing some questions that I often get when it comes to Rahi. But first, I want to show you something I think you guys will really enjoy. Lost Media. So, if you guys are big into learning about aspects of Bionicle that have sort of been lost to time or buried in certain projects, I'd really highly encourage you to go ahead and take a look at the YouTube channel Hexadecimal Mantis, which I will be linking in the description here as well. Go give them a subscribe to, if you will. Like, they've been on YouTube forever. Their whole thing is just like digging really deep into the code of like different Bionicle games and different media, and like even re-implementing things that were cut from like the final game. So like playing as characters you're not supposed to, or playing levels you're not supposed to, and rebuilding stuff from scratch. It's honestly an incredible, just crazy amount of work. And yeah, I wouldn't know what any of this stuff is without that channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look, starting off with the first Rahi, the one that I was most interested in rebuilding. And I have this right here is what I call the Tagura elephant. Right now, the mask is not on his head because we had storms yesterday. I put all my masks away and took them with me. But suffice to say, he would wear a Huna on the front of his mask. And of course, these ears being Galax shields, those are probably the most notable things on this, the most identifiable things when I look at this elephant. Now, one other thing that's kind of notable with this is the fact that it carries something on its back. I'm not sure if it's like a battery pack, if it's maybe a TOA canister. I'm really not positive. These spin around in the videos. I just took screenshots of them kind of from the side, so it's showing as much identifiable stuff as possible. But it kind of looks like a little battery pack, which makes me think maybe this was for like a mission where you had to like either retrieve it or maybe even defend it from other attackers. And that would have been pretty cool. Obviously, those are pretty popular mission type in games from like the early to mid 2000s. So it makes sense that it would show up in a game like this. But yeah, we can't know for sure. That said, as for other pieces on the model, it's really hard to tell what anything else is. Basically, the trunk is kind of amalgamous, you know. It's just too difficult to really tell. Maybe galley hooks for the tusks, but outside of that, most of the rest of it is kind of left up to creative freedom, and that's exactly what I did. So, of course, when I was designing the model, I made sure that not only did I design something that looked appropriate given the size of the head here, but of course, in this case, I wanted to be able to add a function in, which is the rearing of the head to knock things around if you want to. It's actually a fairly straightforward model, and you can find out more about it on the Discord server, which is linked at the bottom of this video, linked in the description of all of my videos, and you just go check out the channel skybirdmakes. You can see all 199 plus mocks. Moving on to the next Rahi. This one you might be familiar with because this was not actually cut from the game. However, there's plenty more. But this one I just was fascinated by because I still want to build it at some point. This is a running Rahi with 6 legs. And what I find really fascinating about this one is it's dog-like, although it has a fairly short tail. But then it has, again, those 6 legs, 3 pairs of legs. And I always found that really odd because yeah, Lego did design a lot of Rahi kind of abstract, but usually it was at the loss of features, not the gaining of features. So oftentimes you had like the Muwaka and Kanera, which had treads replace their rear legs for purposes. Here, adding legs to it, that I find really fascinating. So I think I have an idea of what function I would want this to work with, but I don't know how I'd want to activate it just yet. We'll play around with it. It looks really fascinating though, but really cannot tell what basically any of the pieces are on this. This is probably one I'd actually check out in-game and steady really hard in-game as well. Fairly low poly model here too, which is going to be something you'll see quite common in these pictures, mostly because, again, many of these, because they were cut from the game, didn't make it past the phase of being a low poly model. This might have been in the game for all I know too. Some of these do appear as little like ambient creatures, so honestly I don't know. I have built this one, but it's very hard to tell honestly what any of the parts are. It is a bat, I can tell that. The head looks maybe Galax shield like in black. I did not use a Galax shield though on mine for a handful of reasons, but I did use a piece that was sort of triangular shaped at the front, and I did use shields on the outside being Parak shields in black for wings. Made sense. It was simple enough, and something I thought was cute with the one that I built, and you can check it out on the Discord again, which I might as well show you because it's actually a fairly recent one. So let me go ahead and open that real quick. Is I gave it teeth too. Yeah, here it is. In fact, all three of these Rahi right here are Rahi you will be seeing in this video because all three of them come from the game. There's a rat Rahi with Borak torso as its body. There is this bat, which is the one we were looking at just a moment ago. Of course, I gave it teeth because I thought that was kind of cute. And the white, shows up as like eyes on the top side, right? Makes sense. And then, of course, this little spider guy, which we'll see here in a little bit. So again, check out the Discord server for more information on that. But let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This one I do find fascinating, but it is hard to see. This is a fairly small model, so we're zoomed in really hard. And yeah, I played these videos at like the highest quality I could. But again, there's only so much information we can get from this, right? So as for the back end on this, it does look kind of like the Nui Jaga tail, Robo Rider headpiece, but it's a bit sharper at the tip of it. So it's not, it's possible it could be something else. As for the legs, my thought is that these are probably the harpoon spear-like gun pieces that have been around in LEGO for like ever. They were used on the Scuba Slicer set, just because they have roughly this same shape here. And it was a piece that LEGO was using at that time for intricate stuff like this. So of course, we never saw it used in Bionicle, but it would have been kind of cool to see it as legs on some creature. I use it on my cicada build, but yeah, suffice to say, the head on this one, I could not tell you what in the world that is supposed to be. But let's go ahead and move on to the rat. That is this guy right here. And for the head, we really don't have anything quite like it. I use the hockey skate piece, I believe. I already forgot what mine looked like, but the hockey skate piece is probably the closest thing we have to this, though it does not appear in brown. Obviously, it's a Rahi. It could come in other colors too, and it does have ears as well, as I can see there. Plus, it has a neck that looks to be like corrugated, but it's thicker than the tail, which probably a rigid hose. It's honestly hard to say. So it could be that this is just a ribbed hose here, and then this is just a standard rigid hose piece. Again, you just kind of work with what you got, right? As for the feet, though, this is where things get honestly very difficult. I think maybe scuba feet pieces, honestly, the scuba, flippers, but then how would they connect to the ball piece? Because I don't know what LEGO had back in 2001 that would work. Obviously, it's also likely that these are not pieces that exist. They were just pieces created for this model. And, LEGO does a lot of that stuff too. Moving on to the next one. This one is weird to me. And I know some of these are a bit difficult to see with the backgrounds. I do apologize for that, but it is a staircase centipede-like thing. I'm actually not positive this one specifically is a Rahi, but since later we're going to see another Rahi that's kind of similar to this, then actually is a Rahi, I would just assume that it is one as well. And so, yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. I would have loved to honestly have seen something like this in the game. And as for making a function out of this, not that difficult, but still kind of interesting to make something like this. It's not high on my priority list, but it is kind of cool looking either way. Moving on, this is one that I get recommended to build all of the time. I do want to. The thing is, right now, I only own like 2 Toa Nuva canister lid pieces, one white, one black. I can get more, but sometimes they're hard to find. I'm not going to go out and buy them. I can get them for free. So, but that is very clearly, at least to me, the thing that is used in the middle here. I've seen better quality pictures of this where things are much more easily distinguishable. And this is clearly what this is supposed to be, is a Toa Nuva canister lid specifically. So that's what I plan on using. As for on the back edge, it's a little bit hard to see, but this area here is just kind of some funky looking panels that have just been textured over this. Obviously, LEGO doesn't make panels that look exactly like this, but working roughly within that shape here, you should be able to get something. And some of this stuff is much larger than it's supposed to be. Like here we can see, for example, that there's a Borak windscreen piece, but then in other pictures, the whole front end of it is a Borak windscreen piece, and it's got like a Toa Nuva chest piece clipping through it. It's very weird. It's obscure. It's funny. I love it. I have built whales inspired by it before, but not quite like it. This is one I have tackled in the past, but I do plan on revisiting it again. This is a grasshopper build. I actually did one of these a long time ago, and I might have even made a short about it. I did make a short about another grasshopper build that I did, which took this idea and just condensed it. But suffice to say, it's actually fairly simple to identify some of the parts, at least, on here. Most notably, the wing pieces are panels. That's obvious. There's also a Nuvok shield on the sides of this in red, which is cool. As for the legs, I don't know, honestly. Back legs, again, don't really know. Could probably figure out some things that would fit roughly with that shaping. And of course, the eyes, again, really unidentifiable pieces, but at least the colors are visible. You can see Tahu in the background there as well. This one, yeah, basically impossible to see on this background. However, I believe this one shows up in-game, and this is just an ambient lizard. It is teeny tiny, it is teal and red, and it's built around, from what I can tell, a very specific lift arm piece. It's the same piece that's used as like the Nui Rama Stinger, for example. I think that's what this is. I'm not positive of that, but that's just what I'm going to go with. As for everything else, hard to say. Mostly going to rely on system stuff at that scale. But yeah, who knows? So this one is the bridge centipede, and this one's kind of weird because it has treads on the back end, but then you can see that there's two pairs of treads. Well, that might not come across super well on camera here. But yeah, and then there's the actual bridge segments that can, go between a distance, a chasm or whatever, right? And so that would allow you to get across. Then it's got these antenna pieces, which can easily act as hooks as well. That's also a really interesting one, and I'd much prefer to build this one before the stair version, but I imagine both of them are going to be very similar in how they work. So, could be worth playing around with both. This one is just like a pod thing. I don't know if you ride inside of it, if it was supposed to be a Rahi exactly, but it is kind of interesting. As for notable pieces, there are some panels I can tell on the feet here, but it's kind of hard to tell exactly what they're supposed to be. Legs, honestly, could even be Nuva legs. This was around the same time that the Nuva were out, where it did exist, so it's possible. And then, of course, Parak shield on the side here. Everything else, though, really, honestly, hard to say what exactly it is supposed to be. A lot of it looks a bit proprietary, though I think you could do the base of this pretty easily with some existing system pieces as well. And then moving on, we have a frog that is like a magenta or, old purple, likely. And I assume medium blue. With this lighting, it's hard to tell. Yellow eyes as well. It's interesting looking. Honestly, it could be a frog. It could be a beetle as well, the way that it is structured. Although I know that the animation shows it jumping kind of like a frog does. It's also possible it could be like a blend of the two. So definitely some interesting stuff. As you can see, a lot of inspiration fodder for making Rahi, but that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and put this video out. So in a nutshell, what inspires me to build? Well, I would say first off, the most inspiring time of year is right now for me, springtime, because I get to go outside, I get to see things. I have a tree blooming right outside my window, and so I get to see like birds and insects and things. And sometimes it's as simple as just looking out the window and saying, oh yeah, I haven't made one of those yet. Or hearing a noise like a tree frog or a cicada, which has happened semi-recently as well, last summer, I believe. And that inspired me to build a cicada as well. So little things like that. But also sometimes I'm driven by mechanisms rather than animals. Now, that's not to say that every Rahi needs to have a mechanism. I encourage you to just build Rahi in general, whether you include a mechanism or not. I like to where I can, but I don't see it as like a necessity per se. And one build that I showed off in a previous video was this one right here. This is from the Ring of Fire Lego Racer set from 2008. It's a very simple little mechanism. It's just a pusher, right? But I was playing around with this and I realized just how much this reminds me of an inchworm, the way that it moves, because if my thumb is the ground for a moment here and my fingers are just the rest of my hand pushing down on it, you'll see that if this is the head of the model, it reaches forward. Then when I release, it snaps in that direction, right? So we've gained distance. And then I do it again, we gain distance, and you can keep going. And then if you add some weight back here, that release should translate that inertia, translate that kinetic energy, that motion in that direction as well. So that could even be paired along with it to push it further forward. So the heavier the rear end on it is, the more successful it should be, but it is a balancing act for sure. Still really fun to play around with that design. It's very simple. I have not made an inchworm, but I've wanted to for a while. So yeah, that's probably one of the other Rahi that I plan on making soon too. So it's not just about building what we see on screen here. It's not just about building what is found in Lost Media, but it's also about what is building just things that I want to see, things that I've wanted to build but just haven't really figured out a way, or have been maybe putting off because I don't I'm waiting on a piece, or I don't have the exact idea in mind yet. And sometimes you just need that little extra spark. Something kicks it in motion. You're like, oh yeah, that's the thing that'll get this done. So yeah, that's basically it in a nutshell, though. Just looking at Lost Media. So if you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because it does help the channel out. And of course, as always, you can join the conversation down in the comments below, or check out the description, as I mentioned, for Discord, Instagram, Patreon, or in this case, Hexadecimal Mantis's YouTube channel. Again, highly encourage you to go and subscribe, support them in whatever ways you can. And yeah, lastly, Band-Aid, just because I got a little infection on the side of my face, unfortunately. You probably noticed in videos, but now I've addressed that. So I'm doing all right, and the weather's good here now. So I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care.